Respectful audience, I love it. Good evening. Special evening. My name is Tiff Beatty. I am the Associate Director here at the National Public Housing Museum. Welcome to the Black Tax. This event is presented in partnership with the Cook County Assessor's Office of Racial Equity and Real Estate Conversations. We also want to acknowledge the Chicago Lawyers Chapter of the American Constitution Society, the leading progressive legal organization, which is also a co-sponsor of tonight's program. And of course, I want to shout out all of our board members and staff in the audience. If you just raise your hand, National Public Housing Museum, thank you so much for helping us put this together, and of course to you all for being here. We know there's a lot of very important work to be done and places to be, and so we just thank you for choosing to be here with us tonight and for valuing the conversation that we're going to have here at the National Public Housing Museum. We want to say welcome home and welcome back to those of you who've joined us before. In particular, any public housing residents. We want to just make sure you all know that we do provide free memberships for public housing residents. And you can also help to support that mission by becoming a becoming a member of the Public Housing Museum yourself. So those are very affordable, and you can get those at the front desk. And yeah, just the way that we support our mission to truly be the home of public housing residents here in Chicago as well as across the nation. So thank you so much for supporting us, for being here, and hope you come back. If you haven't done our historic apartment tour, you actually get a free tour with your membership, and so I want to make sure I plug that. It's an immersive experience, one of a kind. It offers stories and insights into the important history of public housing through three recreated apartments spanning from 1938 to 1975. We're also offering buy one, get one coupons. Who doesn't love a coupon? So if you didn't get one on your way in, please get one on your way out. And of course, please also get our books by our featured authors, which you'll hear more about tonight. And you will also get a 10% discount on any purchase in our museum store if you get your membership. There's also lots of participating businesses in the neighborhood that will honor that membership as well. So give it up for the Public Housing Museum membership and supporting the mission. And of course, there will be a book signing at the end of this program. And just before that, we will have a short Q&A via note cards. So I will be scanning the room for folks with their hands raised or inquisitive looks on their face. But if you want a note card, just go ahead and raise your hand when we get to the Q&A portion. We'll go ahead and hand those out for you all and hand those to our moderator. And yeah, so now without further ado, let's introduce our amazing speakers. So first we have Andrew Kahrl. Andrew Kahrl is a professor of history and African American studies and director of the Institute for Public History at the University of Virginia. He is the author of several award-winning books and numerous articles in leading academic journals on the history of race and inequality in the US. His most recent book, The Black Tax: 150 Years of Theft, Exploitation, and Dispossession in America, published in 2024, received the Elizabeth Cohen Prize for the Best Book on Cities and Political Power, and honorable mention for the Kenneth Jackson Award for Best Book in North American Urban History from the Urban History Association, and was named, there's a lot of impressive things are gonna be said tonight. We'll get to you, Tonika, we'll get to you. And was named a finalist for the Los Angeles Times Book Prize in History. In addition to his scholarship, Kahrl has written opinion pieces and essays for the New York Times, Washington Post, The Guardian, Boston Review, The American Prospect, and Jacobin, among other popular outlets, and has appeared on a variety of media outlets, including NPR, C-SPAN, Pacifica Radio, and Bloomberg. A native of Ohio and a proud Midwesterner, Kahrl and his family currently live in Charlottesville, Virginia. Welcome back to the Midwest, Kahrl. Tonika Lewis Johnson is a nationally recognized social justice artist and photographer and a lifelong resident of Chicago's South Side Inglewood neighborhood. Yeah, give it up for Inglewood. As of today, Tonika Lewis Johnson is a 2025 MacArthur Fellow. Which of course confirms what many of us already knew, which is that she is a true genius and a game changer. Her art is synonymous with bold, transformative work that exposes how segregation continues to shape Chicago's built environment, community, and narratives. In 2021 and 2022, I personally had the privilege of working with Tonika as part of the National Public Housing Museum's Artist as Instigator residency, which she leveraged to ideate and develop a new groundbreaking project called Inequity for Sale, which you'll hear more about this evening from Tonika herself, along with the Folded Map Project and Unblock Inglewood, and so many other important projects. Tonika is a 2025 Pritzker Fellow at the University of Chicago's Institute of Politics and a 2024 Gordon Parks Foundation Fellow. Lots of fellowships, I love it. Along with many, many other accolades. I'd be here all night if I were to read them all. So I also think, though, it's important to mention that Tonika is also a co-founder of the Inglewood Arts Collective and a member of Chicago's official reparations task force, using art to confront injustice and inspire healing. Tonight's conversation will be moderated by Kahrl Harris. Kahrl Harris is the Chief Civic Engagement Officer and Deputy Assessor with the Cook County Assessor's Office, where he leads public participation and outreach for nearly 2 million property owners in Cook County. Kahrl was previously a senior outreach planner with Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, also known as CMAP, where he led a comprehensive stakeholder engagement for the Chicago regions on to 2050. He's worked in grassroots community development and organizing in the Auburn Gresham neighborhood and served as an assistant to former Mayor Richard M. Daley. Please join me in welcoming Tonika, Andrew, and Kahrl.
Mic check. All right, well, thanks. Tiff, I don't know if you got my email. I told you to start with my bio, and then you got me following. I mean, we'll talk about that later. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm super excited about this conversation. Thank you to the National Public Housing Museum and everyone who came tonight. We have a dynamic duo of racial equity, courageous historian and social justice artist, whose stock obviously went way up today. So thanks for confirming before today so that you could be with us. But really, I'm inspired by you both. And I'll say to you, Andrew, you were one of the first thought leaders that came to mind when we were putting together the racial equity and real estate conversations series with the Assessor's Office. And then to watch your book come to fruition is amazing. I first learned about you from the producer of the documentary series Shame of Chicago, Bruce Orenstein. And he told me, he said, Kelvin, if you work in property tax assessments, you have to read Andrew Kahrl. And I said, no, I haven't never heard of Andrew Kahrl. And he gave me this like really judgmental look, like, you work in assessments and you never read Andrew Kahrl? I said, no. So he followed through. He sent me some articles when he got back to campus, and I said, wow, he's exactly right, and I've been following you ever since. Tonika, you know how I feel about you and your work, and your work obviously hits home. Growing up not far in Auburn Gresham, you in Inglewood. That puts me in a don't go neighborhood, which you'll talk about later. But really, and the way that you've used your work to really create the language and the narrative around segregation in a way that people can really feel and understand. And then also always say, and I've told you, our lives growing up have direct parallels. You were going to Lane Tech around the time when I was going to Francis Parker in Lincoln Park, and I tell people we probably were on the same bus together sometime. Maybe the 44 Racine, or it might have been the 22 Clark, but we can talk about that. but so thrilled to be in conversation today. We're going to get right into it. Tonika, I believe you have some slides or video that you'd like to share. So Tiff, what's the best way for us to kind of cue that stuff up?
She's all set. Yeah. All right.
Since Andrew has a whole book and you all can like buy it and go to pages that directly connect to the conversation, that's very lucky. But I do participatory art. A lot of my project is in the built environment to connect people to these large systemic issues that is backed up by amazing experts like Andrew. So I just wanted to situate you all in my work so that you can kind of understand the importance of learning about this history and property taxes. So for one, I just want to start with something very basic, okay, to get you all active in participatory art, but how it connects to these issues. I would like for you to raise your hand if you have been told or have heard that Chicago's South Side is dangerous and to don't go. Just let's be honest. All right, keep them high, keep them raised high. Now I want everybody to look around. That is how redlining is personally perpetuated today. That is how Black neighborhoods are continued to be devalued. And so I wrote a book about it, co-authored with Dr. Maria Creason, and just to connect you all to the personal aspect of the kind of stories in that book called Don't Go, I would love if someone, just one person, okay, courageous person, could volunteer and read Joey's story so you can understand how this narrative is pervasive and continues to devalue neighborhoods today. Oh wow, Janice. Yeah, go right ahead, yes. Oh wait, is that? Oh my goodness, hello. I see everybody in the audience, thank you. Would you mind reading? Yes, the whole thing. Quick little excerpt, yep, of the longer story.
I boarded the Western Avenue bus near my home in Humboldt Park for a bumpy ride all the way down to 73rd Street in Inglewood. The place where I've been told if you're white, you'll be shot, robbed, and killed within minutes there. But a piano needed service and I needed the work. So I got off the crowded bus, walked a few blocks to see my client, Mrs. Jones. I passed empty lots, gorgeous homes, older folks relaxing on porches, and kids playing in the streets. To be honest, I was kind of disappointed because I didn't see any of that stuff, gangs or violence. I didn't feel like my life was in danger. After I fixed the piano, enjoyed a few pastries, set out especially for me by Mrs. Jones, her eyes welled up as she thanked me for my hard work. I didn't want to tell you this on the phone, but you were about the 6th or 7th technician I called because I couldn't get anyone to come over here. They won't service our area, and we're not the only community that suffers. After sharing a hug with Mrs. Jones, I waited with a small group of people at the bus stop on 73rd Street. 2 white police officers pulled up and said, "Excuse me, if you want, we can get you out of here. You're headed to the north side, right? We can take you there. We can get you out of here."
Thank you. That's one of the many storytellers in the Don't Go book that is out there, for you to purchase. But I want to kind of let you know some statistics about Greater Inglewood, which is why I think it's an amazing case study of what many Black neighborhoods across the country is dealing with. You can see all of the other information, but I really want to bring your attention to the 30% home ownership rate. That is what was fascinating to me. I believe we're all nerds here, so I don't have to explain why I was fascinated with that. Not only as a resident, but also as someone who wanted to really understand my community and why it looked the way that it looked. And so my project Folded Map that brought residents together who lived on the same street, and they were called Map Twins. I want to just play for you just a short 1-minute video of them answering the question of how much did your house cost? Because the home ownership rate and the crazy price differences of homes in Black neighborhoods and sister neighborhoods in the predominantly white North Side. I was just curious, and that curiosity is what led me not only to do this project, but to read all of the reports I'm sure you all have read. Now, let me see if I can play it.
So
Okay.
it's amazing how much Chicago has shifted just in the last couple of years. And when I bought my house 7 years ago, I feel like there was still, Rogers Park was still somewhat affordable in comparison to a lot of Chicago neighborhoods. So I knew I wanted something under $400,000 was what I was looking for. I know you're like, well, hold on a second.
And Carmen, you said this building has been in your family, so can you talk about kind of the purchase history? Do you know how much it cost at the time?
No, but I believe it probably was $30,000, you know, but in '74, that was a lot of money, but 30,000, and I think it's probably worth a lot more than that now, but never know.
Exactly. The devaluation. And so after
One of the tragic aspects.
Oh, Burl, I gotta wait for you. So in that quest to understand my neighborhood and why the home ownership rate is so low, I was able to get introduced to this amazing report called The Plunder of Black Wealth in Chicago. Bruce Orenstein was one of the people who fundraised for the report, as well as Lisa. And it helped reveal that land sale contracts is the primary reason that home ownership rate didn't even have a chance to be high in my neighborhood. And so I want to share with you what Burl said about land sale contracts so that you can understand its historic predatory practice and how it impacts neighborhoods today. Here we go. There you go.
One of the tragic aspects of the whole land contract situation was that the people who first moved into a neighborhood like Lawndale or Englewood, they were striving middle-class African Americans. They were leaving the Black Belt and trying to go to a place where there was more space and better schools and better housing stock. And so they were moving there with a lot of optimism and paying top dollar for these properties. So the idea, I think the myth today is that, well, these neighborhoods are poor because poor people live there, poor people have always lived there, and that explains it. We don't need to go any further, you know? Whereas in fact, wealth was in these communities and was taken out of these communities very systematically through the process of predatory land installment contracts.
And so land installment contracts, it's basically a rent to own. It's very similar to a car loan, how you are responsible for everything, got to do repairs, and you don't own it until you're finished paying for it. And so I, along with the National Public Housing Museum, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure. Okay. Created landmarkers for the nearly 600 homes in Greater Englewood.
A local artist has unveiled an...
I'm horrible with this. I'm gonna just leave it there for now, okay? For these more than 600 homes in Greater Englewood that was sold on land sale contracts. And I wanna share with you a little bit about that project with this media coverage that was trying so hard to get played on its own. Let's see.
A local artist has unveiled an eye-opening exhibit that puts a spotlight on housing segregation in Chicago. The one-of-a-kind exhibit cannot be found in a museum. You walk through Englewood to see it. Our Chris Hush spoke with the artist behind the Passion Project.
It's one of 15 homes that I'm creating landmarkers for.
Walking down most streets in Englewood.
7250 South Green, was legally stolen from Black resident John Garner.
You'll find abandoned homes like this one.
A piece of history in which we were stolen from.
42-year-old Tonika Lewis Johnson.
Everyone knows about Inglewood as a drug-infested, violent neighborhood.
Now highlighting the segregated history that changed the course of her community.
That happened in the 50s and 60s. Why is that so important to bring that up now?
The issues that we're dealing with today in this community are literally the consequence of this issue.
By late spring, 15 of these markers will be erected in front of various homes in Englewood. Partnering with the National Public Housing Museum, the installation is called Inequity for Sale. Johnson identifying more than 160 homes bought through high-interest land sale contracts.
90% of the Black families that were trying to become homeowners got their homes on land sale contracts and didn't know it. They thought they had a mortgage.
Paving the way for the blight many Chicagoans see today.
Inviting the community in and to be able to see it again on the block in the neighborhood is really powerful.
Visitors can see a brief history of the property, then scan a QR code on their phone to learn just how detrimental land sale contracts were for Black families trying to build wealth.
I really just want people to reimagine what Inglewood could be today if those families were not stolen from and taken advantage of.
Understanding the past to understand how we got here and how to move forward. Chris Hush, NBC5 News.
And so he said a little bit over 100 at the time of the report, but the complete study revealed that it was over 600. This is the map of how many homes in the 50s and 60s were sold on land sale contracts. And it's important to note that land sale contracts meant that you did not earn any equity. Okay, so even if it took you 20 years to pay the land sale contract to own the home, you didn't earn any equity. And then not only that, in all of Chicago, it's documented to be over 3,000 homes. And of course, they are in the neighborhoods that you hear on the news. So I wanted to create a project to help people understand how this history is with us, but more importantly, that redlining is one way in which wealth was extracted from Black neighborhoods. And once you put people, segregate them, it's easier for you to discriminate against them. And so land sale contracts is one of the other ways in which people were taken advantage of, as well as we'll get into property taxes. But it's important to note that there were so many mechanisms that were operating against Black neighborhoods. And so I'm really excited for us to be able to have this conversation today so you can learn more about the ways in which that happened outside of redlining. And so Unblocked Inglewood is the latest project that aims to help provide home repairs and relief in a lot of different ways to legacy Black homeowners in Greater Inglewood. And some of them are descendants of people who purchased their home on a land sale contract. And so I want to share with you what that project is with a short clip, but I also am looking forward to kind of getting into the conversation of what I've learned in doing this project, specifically with the value of homes, the lack of appreciation, and the situation that a lot of older homeowners are in, not being able to afford home repairs, and having people trying to pay their taxes when they want to save money to get home repairs and sometimes offset paying taxes late. So all of this is connected, and I want to kind of close with sharing with you about Unblocked Inglewood.
Need new doors. The doors is all tore up under the bottom. We need new radiators for the heat. And the fixtures on the wall, all the fixtures. My name is Melvin Walls, the son of Doc and Johnella Walls. My mother, she passed away 2018, and then I became to be the owner of this house. This is the kitchen area right here. And you see the floors and everything is just tore up. You know, I'm up in age, and you know, it's too late for me to turn around and, and go somewhere else. But it's just that, it's so much work to be done.
I view them as the engine of this neighborhood. And if they can't afford to get plumbing repairs, foundation repairs, roof repairs, then what is going to become of this neighborhood? I wanted to use a project to help them get free repairs at no cost to them.
We know the gravity of the situation. We know how much money was extracted. How do we figure out how to put that money back in a meaningful way that undoes the harm that was done many generations ago?
Unblocked is ultimately arts, redirecting it into beautification of already standing structures like folks' homes.
There you go, baby. I'm be looking for you. All right. Give Jimmy and them that one. Okay. All right, baby. Good seeing you. Right now, we're going to pass out flyers for our next Unblocked meeting, which will be held on Wednesday. I want you at the meeting here, and I don't want no excuses. Next Wednesday.
Oh, okay.
Or either be at the meeting or move. And we're looking for all the tenants as well as owners to come out to this meeting to be involved. Unblock came in along with the Chicago Bungalow Association, did wonders. We were able to do electric, plumbing, roofs. They came out and worked with us, and you would have thought they were family. This is the upstairs bedroom, and they did installations in here. Put in new vanities, new toilets. They put a new roof upstairs, up on this right here. They put a new roof on the house.
Good evening, everyone.
The unity that has transpired out of this block in the last year has been unbelievable. They got guys on this block right here that we wasn't even talking. It's just brought the whole community together.
So that is Unblocked. Thank you. Yeah, I'm looking forward to sharing all of the information that will be and the data that we'll be gathering over the next few years of the project as we continue to do repairs, but more importantly, helping this entire block of people who are 70 years and older deal with estate planning. So that's why I'm really excited to have this conversation with you all today. Thank you.
Yes, let's give Tonika another hand. No, that was great, and that's why I call this the dynamic duo, because not everybody's gonna read a dense, historical book, although it is an easy read, all right, and I recommend that you do, but they can participate in your projects and understand, from day-to-day life, and talk to people and have these conversations and really empathize and see the work
And
that
I'm
you're
gonna make
doing.
an art project out of his book. That's what's gonna.
Is this an announcement tonight? Maybe.
We're gonna figure it out.
Okay. All right. So, all right. So let's pivot to you, Andrew. Also, I did mention earlier, Cook County Assessor Fritz Kagi will be joining us later on, and we'll be giving some remarks. So he'll also be talking about the work that we're doing and kind of the evolution of this kind of work, and how these two have influenced him and us as an office. Andrew, the Black Tax. That's a hard title, right? The black tax. I mean, it's loaded kind of with, all sorts of experience and kind of, you can look at it as kind of a metaphor, right, for the struggle and the experience of just kind of Black people in America overall. But you take it literally and you say, what's the experience of local taxpayers in America and in cities that not a lot of people think about if you don't work in it. And we know property taxes is so complicated that you don't know if you're being treated fairly unless you know how everybody else is treated, and who knows what the assessor's office is doing, and who knows where your tax dollars actually go. So tell us a little bit about just the experience of the Black taxpayer in America and what you sort of uncovered.
Yeah, so well, thank you all for coming out tonight. And I mean, this is, Well, it's really great to also see how, Tonika and my work were really connected in a lot of ways through Beryl Satter's book, and I just want to really give credit to that book. It was really a transformative experience reading that book, in that, it reveals how, inequality is not produced through just the lack of resources or lack of opportunities, but through the exploitation and through the plunder of the resources that African Americans had struggled and strived to acquire. And that was something that I was really struck by when I first started looking at the experience of African Americans as taxpayers, and especially at the local level. And one of the things I found early on was, one, that consistently black neighborhoods and African American homeowners have been overassessed on property taxes relative to the value of their homes. Those same neighborhoods have been underserved when it comes to the public goods and services that local tax dollars support. And then third, this system of tax enforcement, namely what happens if you fail to pay your property taxes on time, has spawned this entire set of predatory practices that has been devastating for generations of homeowners, landowners, and entire communities. And so specifically what I'm referring to, and this is very relevant here to Chicago and Illinois, is that here in this state, if you do not pay your property taxes on time, the county will place a lien on your home and then sell that lien to a private investor who can then begin charging exorbitant interest that can increase up to 48%, start attaching fees onto that. And if you don't pay it on time or pay it within a certain period of time, they can take ownership of your home and all of its worth, and you lose everything. And this type of scheme has been,
and that's unique in Illinois also, right? I mean, we have even, worse or more punitive.
No, Illinois is one of the worst. And I think, and this is another thing to remember here, it doesn't have to be this way. Other states have actually removed this private class of investors from the tax delinquency process entirely. And this is currently being debated right now in Springfield. And so this is, one of the things that I then began to look at was, okay, well, what does the history of taxation look like when you look at it from the perspective and experiences of Black Americans? And one of the things you find is that, taxes are supposed to help support and better society, work toward greater equality, and instead, local tax systems do the exact opposite. They actually are a hidden engine of inequality, and make all of the sort of problems around struggle for homeownership, to acquire homeownership, build wealth through homeownership, that much more difficult. They contribute to and reinforce inequality in public education, environmental inequalities. And so this was something that I think was almost kind of hiding in plain sight, because taxes, we know, like death, we all were sort of affected by them, but we hadn't really, historians especially, hadn't really looked closely at this particular problem, or even sort of considered the ways that these systems, especially at the local level, could be subject to abuse and prone to these sorts of inequitable results. So that was something I really dug into and sort of began to learn more about, and I thought was important, an important history to tell, in part because these problems are unresolved. This is a history of inequality, a history of exploitation, but it's one that is not part of our past. This is something, these are unresolved, ongoing problems that need our urgent attention.
So to unpack that a little more, what are some of the root causes, right, of the inequity in property taxation? I mean, is it the assessors? Are the assessors racist? And certainly we have a history of seeing that, through from Reconstruction, as your book looks at, through the South, all the way to more recent times. But it's also not just the individuals, but the system.
Exactly.
So what are the structures around property taxes that can make them so inequitable?
Absolutely. And I think this book is really a history of structural racism that tells you how the structure was built, and who it was built for, and what it meant to live inside of that structure. And there is certainly no, and I think one of the things I sort of say, one of the sort of problems with local tax systems is that they are local, in that they tend to reproduce and inequalities between places. The administrators of local property taxes are uniquely immune from outside interference. They wield a great degree of discretionary power, and certainly, during, and I sort of detail what that meant for African Americans living in the Jim Crow South. African Americans, in spite of all of the obstacles and challenges that were put in their way, they nevertheless accumulated upwards of 16 million acres of land in the 50 years after emancipation. An absolutely remarkable story. But even as they were doing that, they were facing local tax assessors who were overvaluing their acres in order to shift the tax burden onto them and away from the largest plantation owners in the South. And of course, as we all know, they were grossly underfunding the schools and public services that those tax dollars went to, and using these tax sale laws as a means of stealing that property. And it was always when the property became valuable that black landowners became most vulnerable to this. It was when suddenly a piece of property was desired by someone else that suddenly it ends up on the tax sale rolls, oftentimes even without the owner's knowledge. And so there was a lot of kind of, as I sort of described, bureaucratic racism that was happening. But I think for Chicago especially, and I sort of tell this story, and I follow the journey of African Americans from the South to the North into cities like Chicago. And I show how it became much more structural in nature in a city like Chicago. And one of the sort of aspects that was really fueling these different these inequalities between neighborhoods and between cities and suburbs was the growing sort of fragmentation of our tax bases. The fact that there were certain tax advantages for middle-class whites to move out to suburbs. And the tax system encouraged, say, wealthy communities to form, cluster together, and then hoard their tax resources while starving the cities that they'd left behind. And then in turn, as cities like Chicago began to see their tax base drained by deindustrialization, corporate relocation, and then the sort of exodus of middle-class whites, increasingly that burden was being shifted onto lower income and predominantly black neighborhoods. Sometimes intentionally, other times just as a reflection of the way that the system was set up. And so this became a real kind of quiet force that was both undermining the ability of homeowners to hold on to their homes and undermining the value of property in black neighborhoods. I mean, the fact is that, the way that housing markets were structured and designed, property in the hands of an African-American home, African-American was worth less, it appreciated at a slower rate, and these are, problems that remain to this day. And so one of the questions you got to ask is, well, what's contributing to that? And the fact that these homes are also being overtaxed at the same time as that they're being undervalued is one of the reasons why they're continuing to sort of experience that, the struggle to build value through home ownership. So I think this was, again, one of these things that was kind of hiding in plain sight that we needed to sort of really look squarely at.
And the value part being particularly important for African Americans who have most of their wealth in their homes, right? I mean, the people that you showed in your video, I mean, they likely don't have, huge portfolio of stocks and, savings, things like that. When they say that home's worth $90,000, that's pretty much their nest egg. So,
yeah.
That's what makes this conversation even more important.
Yeah, and so then here in Chicago, you have, and in fact, literally some of the same people who were perpetrating this contract sale scheme and accumulating millions of dollars at the expense of black Chicagoans. We're also engaged in tax buying. This whole practice of buying these liens and then using them as a way of then accumulating obscene amounts of profits, not just through taking people's homes, but also the expense that it took to actually save your home from tax foreclosure. Paying these really onerous interest rates, fees that were draining wealth out of these communities and enriching a few. And I think when we look at and we recognize there's
and you name names in the book.
Oh
who they are.
Absolutely. No, and they're still around. They're still, in fact, this is a thriving business here in Cook County that is generating hundreds of millions of dollars at the expense mostly of low-income, predominantly black and brown neighborhoods in the county.
So before we get to the conversation, can you just sort of camp on that and unpack a little bit about what's going on in Illinois right now? Particularly, you alluded to the Injustice Watch story, but sort of what's the unique nature of what's happening in Illinois right now and in Springfield?
Yeah, well, just to give you a couple of figures here from this Injustice Watch investigation. This came out last year. It's actually kind of what inspired us to sort of have this event. And they found that between 2019 and 2025, over 1,000 owner-occupied homes in Cook County were lost to tax foreclosure. And half of those were for tax debts of $2,000 or less. A dozen of them were for tax debts less than $200. The vast majority of these homes were in neighborhoods like Roseland and Englewood. And here's the real sort of kicker. So these tax buyers put down, in total, a $2.3 million investment, in a sense. Like that's the total amount of the tax liens that were purchased. And the total market value of those homes that they then gained ownership of was over $108 million. So again, $2.3 million investment for $108 million profit. I mean, it's just absolutely obscene, unconscionable. And the victims here are, again, like elderly women like Velma Lewis. The investigation sort of tells the story of she lost her home in Maywood that was valued at over $108,000 over a $6,000 tax bill that she was unable to pay. And she had to buy her home back from this tax buyer. She literally and this happened, and I detail this, happening in Chicago in the 1960s and 70s. It's still happening to this day. This woman had to take out a 30-year mortgage, which she will be paying for the remainder of her life, and her children will assume upon her death, for a home that she had actually owned free and clear. I mean, and this again is like, another aspect. I mean, the people who often file into tax delinquency were people who had actually already paid off their mortgages, paid off their contracts. They own their homes outright, and then they lose it over these, a tax bill that they couldn't pay or that they miss paying, and then all of a sudden they're thrust into this, trap that the law has set up.
And what's the specific piece that Illinois is last or failing at? The ability for these tax buyers to take everything, the equity and the whole.
So Illinois is, this law is unconstitutional. And in fact, the Supreme Court ruled 2 years ago that the total loss of property, for a single tax bill, and all the equity built up in that home is unconstitutional. And so every state that has these laws on the books over the last couple of years have had to amend them in ways to ensure that homeowners who do lose their home to tax foreclosure, which is a big problem and an issue in and of itself, but nevertheless, if they lose their home to tax foreclosure, they then are entitled to the value of that property minus the tax debts. Illinois has still not fixed this problem. And part of the reason why is because there is an army of lobbyists down in Springfield representing the tax lien industry, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry with deep ties to Wall Street, private equity, hedge funds. They're the ones who, they're heavily invested in this now, because again, it is very profitable. And they're resisting the types of structural changes that many are calling for and are, I think, long overdue.
Okay. Last time I checked, I think the tax sale has been put on hold as a result of in Cook County. So I know people are looking at it. So hopefully there's some movement, and maybe people are watching here tonight. Let's start the conversation between you guys. And we've thought in the questions, what are some of the commonalities and patterns that bridge and link you two together. So let's go into it. How do the patterns you've traced in the black tax still show up today in places like Englewood, where you work, Tonika? And how does visual storytelling help with those systemic forces, make those systemic forces visible?
Well, first off, with Unblocked Englewood, that's like I said, it's an entire block of homeowners who are, most of them now, because the project's been going on for a few years, are just turned 70, over 70. Miss Justine, who told that woman that she got to come to the meeting or move, just had her 77th birthday. And so what Unblocked Inglewood is doing not only the storytelling to remind people what the faces of exactly what Andrew is talking about, what they look like, but also until there are laws and policy to protect them, what can be done. And so what we have found is we can't fix the property tax issue now. These older people have had people trying to purchase their taxes, so them paying on time, them making sure that they have funds to pay it is priority. That's what's been revealed through Unblocked Inglewood. But more importantly, the things that make them not pay it is what we have been focusing on, which has been home repairs, which is what was covered in that article. And it is sad that that is just the commonality amongst all of the residents there. Even Ms. Justine, the Black landlord, she provides truly affordable housing. She's the one that says, okay, baby, you don't have to get a credit check. Just what can you afford? But in order to maintain her buildings, you know, she has to pay for repairs out of her pocket. So when all of these people are facing any illnesses, or if they have medications that they have to pay, or if they have that leaky roof that Mr. Walls was talking about, sometimes they will pay that and offset their
Which tax
taxes.
do you pay, right? You know, which black tax do you pay first?
Exactly. And so really just figuring out ways to heal and create an opportunity for them to have money to prioritize and be able to pay their taxes and protect them. And also estate planning is what the project is kind of revealing, the benefit of prioritizing home repair and funds to minimize the overpaying of, you know, electric bills. You know, that's a whole other thing that they pay for instead of if they have to choose. So I think that is kind of the complementary aspect of what we're talking about. Is his work is highlighting the issue that needs to be addressed, and Unblocked Inglewood is trying to alleviate some of the harms by offering ways to protect these older homeowners and enable them to pay their taxes, because they don't mind being able to, you know, have to pay taxes. They just don't have enough money to spread around to take care of their aging bodies, to pay higher electric bills because of the repairs that they don't have, and then also just everything else with the upkeep.
And a lot of times people don't know these laws, right? They don't know that your home
Yeah.
can be taken. They don't know that there's going to be a lien and you got this many months if they didn't get it in the mail. And sometimes they don't understand even at that point, you know.
Absolutely.
So many layers.
And I think that was something that's why Tonika's work is so important, and it was something that really motivated me in writing this book, and writing in a way that was accessible, that you don't have to be a tax expert to read this and understand what's going on. And I think part of the sort of ways in which these problems persist is that sometimes they're opaque, they're invisible, or they're hard to understand, or especially in the story of contract sales, many of the victims of this were ashamed of that they'd been tricked. And I think, you know, similarly, you know, we sort of shame oftentimes people who don't pay their taxes on time. And I think, you know, not recognizing all of the sort of you know, financial burdens that families and individuals are facing, and how, you know, again, how cruel this system can be, and for those who are already struggling. And I think, you know, that's something where it's important to kind of explain these things and to sort of, you know, and humanize them. I mean, I think, you know, one of the things I really try to do as a historian is sort of narrate this history through people's experiences. So you can put yourself in the shoes of people who are struggling to pay taxes or are facing these sort of unfair burdens, and to begin to see through that, appreciate just the human dimension of these problems.
You have a George Floyd connection in your book as well. You want to share that little snippet?
Yeah, I mean, this, you know, I start, you know, as I'm kind of going through and like tracing this history, you know, it was discovered that, you know, the great-great-grandfather of George Floyd had, like, I think it was like 36 acres that he owned in North Carolina, basically legally stolen from him at a fraudulent tax sale, that sent his family back into poverty. One that, you know, they were struggled to get out of for generations afterward. They owned, and again, you know, one of the things that was revealing about that, you know, it was over like a $16 tax bill that he supposedly had not paid, which again is very, you know, given the time and the place, is questionable. But also, I was really struck by the fact that, you know, each one of those acres was worth, at the time, upwards of $60. So again, a $16 tax debt over 36 acres times 60. I mean, again, it's just the profits were so obscene for those who were in the business of, you know, stealing land through tax sales.
Yeah. So you talk about where we are today and looking at that through line. I mean, here his generations and his ancestors to today, and where he, you know, where that incident happened, and so many people that, you know, don't become infamous like that are stories. You look at, you know, my grandparents owned a farm, you know, and they were one of the people that, you know, ended up losing their land. So we've got so many stories in our history, anecdotally, you know, and
I mean,
but you did the research.
I mean, the 16 million acres of land that African Americans owned in 1910, you know, was, you know, steadily fell over the course of the 20th century, was down to below 6 million in the 1960s. Which again sort of shows, you know, the story of the production of racial inequality over time was done through plunder, through the taking of the assets that African Americans had acquired and struggled to sort of build. And I think that is something we need to sort of, you know, recognize and sort of see clearly, you know, what the effects of this was.
So let's pivot a little bit to repair, right? We've talked a lot about, you know, what the costs have been and the takings part of it. What does repair look like from each of your standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, we need to sort of, you know, none of these problems are going to be resolved without looking at, you know, structural changes. And I think, you know, really looking clearly at sort of, you know, we need to have a tax system in this country, especially at the local level, that is counteracting the extreme inequality in society, not compounding it. You know, we're here in a museum dedicated to the history of public housing, and the history of public housing is the history of the struggle to make housing a right in America. And I think, you know, this similarly, we need to sort of ask ourselves, you know, is it right to have a tax system that can, you know, literally take people out of their homes? Or, you know, one that, I mean, I think that we shouldn't have taxes on groceries. You know, these are basic human needs. Housing is a basic human need, and we need to sort of look and question, you know, whether or not we have a system that is actually, you know, taxing the right people and the right things. And so that's, you know, one thing in terms. But I think one thing that I sort of point out, you know, at the conclusion is, you know, we need to sort of look at structural changes here and start having the kinds of, you know, conversations that, you know, my book is trying to identify these causal forces and show how they work and what effects they have, then that should be the starting point for repair. You know, beginning to sort of, you know, work toward the types of, you know, changing these sort of, you know, aspects, eliminating some of these factors, so that then we can get to the work of, you know, building a more equitable and equal society.
Ditto.
No, is that really it? All right, wait.
Yeah, no, I just want to uplift the part about just the awareness of this. It's such a critical aspect to making change, healing, and repair, is ensuring that everyone is informed enough about our tax laws and property taxes, and you know, finding ways to make that information accessible. Just even using Chicago's Reparation Task Force as an example. There's so much that that task force is learning about the very specific ways that Illinois and Chicago have been extracting wealth from Black people, which is very different from down south. And this is one of the ways. And so it's important that people who are in positions of power to make change knows about the Black tax, knows about this information. And so I'm just dedicated to creating ways for people to access this information, be curious about it, but also just starting on a very hyper local level, ensuring that the older people in your families or in your network are being protected against this. And that's something that all of us can do until that structural change happens. And I know it doesn't feel like that's enough, but it really is helpful to be able to protect people from this in any way that you know how.
I'll push you a little bit, because the default when you talk about repair is that the communities and the neighborhoods are broken, right? But in a lot of ways, you know, when you look at from an asset standpoint, there's so much good in the communities too, and that's what you pull out in Don't Go and in the videos that you showed. I was smiling and laughing the whole time at the people that you were encountering, even though, you know, the backdrop, you know, is hardship, but there's so much joy and love and togetherness going on too.
Yeah, no, totally. It's you know, communities find ways to cope and deal with structural forces that they can't change, and that is why Unblock Inglewood is putting emphasis on home repair. All of the other ways in which those financial burdens harm people and make them susceptible to this kind of you know, horrible unsolved like scam. And so I'm really happy that we are able to kind of highlight that community aspect.
Yeah, I mean, I would say as well, I mean, that we need to sort of like change the conversation away from sort of broken to just looking at the sort of, you know, the ways that they're being beaten down and, you know, by these particular forces, and sort of alleviate that. And I think that's another sort of element here. But yeah, I think this is an important place to start.
Excellent, excellent. Well, as always, right on time. I'll give him a wink. I'll give him a little wink. Right on time. From doing the work of assessments throughout the county, I promised you the assessor, Cook County Assessor Fritz Kagi, will share some remarks as well, and then we'll go to Q&A, and then these guys will close up, and we'll have a book signing. So everybody has to buy a book. We're gonna lock the doors if you don't walk with both books. You have to buy 2 books. Okay. All right, Fritz.
Hey everybody, how's it been this evening? All right, so good to see so many friends and neighbors and people who've been in so many different conversations with us doing great work. And Tonika and Andrew, so good to see you here. Sorry I wasn't here for the main discussion, but we know all the great work that you do. We've done so many events together in different forms as part of the series, in many different venues. One of my high school classmates at Kenwood, KG Muhammad, wasn't he on your dissertation committee?
Right, yeah.
Okay, so there we go. So I've heard about your work for a while. And this is so important because one of the things that I've learned in this work, and my team, and we have, who else here from my team? I just want you to raise your hands so you can see all the members of our team who are here. One of the things that we've learned is that there's an anthropology to the world of assessors, the people who set up these systems. And if there is no pressure on them to change, they absolutely never, ever will change. Like, that's the culture. And so the work that you both have done and that everyone in this room is doing, it is absolutely vital. These systems don't change without you. They don't change without the scholarly research that goes into identifying, naming, and building out the record of these inequities. Like Andrew and Tonika, the storytelling, the vivid visualization to help people understand in a deeper way, not just with numbers, but with all the other different kinds of senses that we have. Because what we need people to be doing is to tell these stories to themselves to understand why these things have to change. And the work that you do is so essential to reforming, that everyone does in this room, is so essential to reforming things, because where reformers often fall down is sustaining effort. That there's the idea, there's a conception, there's maybe a sense that there's a problem, but how do you sustain? And what you guys have talked about today here is so important. So, you know, what I wanted to do, you know, is really just underline how much we respect the work that you've done. I know we're going to have some great conversations afterwards tonight about how we can continue this. And you know, the fight for equity in property taxes is not nearly over. You know, we got so much to do. The good news is that we, in our office, we've made a big dent in this. Recent research that came from the Mansueto Institute at the University of Chicago shows that our work in making assessments more equitable through eliminating biases, through using better data science, through testing to find patterns of inequity, it shows that for the bottom 70% of homeowners in Cook County, we saved them from $2 billion of property tax levy burden over the last 6 years. That's what this research just showed. And that's just the cost in property taxes. There's an additional benefit because when you lower the cost of ownership for someone's house, you raise the value of their house. So there's an additional benefit that is a multiple of that in raising the value of people's equity that was always depressed before because the taxes were too high. And it has an additional benefit because when people buy homes, they typically buy them with mortgages. And as a finance geek myself, that's called leverage. So when you can do something to raise the value of people's house while their debt stays in place, you might have multiplied the equity, the wealth that they have in their homes by a lot. So working on these problems makes such a great impact on people's wealth. But you know, this is something that we've just done through executive work in our office. We've also done so much outreach, which Kelwin leads. Kelwin came to me after the first few years of our work, and he said, "Fritz, I have an idea to help educate and deepen the coverage for what we do." And we've gotten to the point where we're doing almost one outreach event per business day now in community, and we can focus in on the communities where we're seeing people, where we can get the greatest bang for the systemic buck, or the greatest systemic bang for the buck that we have by coming into communities where people aren't getting their exemptions and they're not doing appeals and there's less understanding. And that is just a great, we feel useful when we do this work, don't we, guys? And you help us, everyone here in this room, as we do that. But an important lesson we've also learned is that because of this resistance to change, there are all sorts of other structures there that many people might not have been aware of, that even we weren't necessarily aware of when we came into this. We still have this murky appeals process that doesn't only exist at our office, but exists at another level of government, the Cook County Board of Review. Who's heard of the Cook County Board of Review? All right. People in our office, people who are property tax appeals lawyers. Okay, that's good. Jerry, I give you a pass because you're a Kenwood Bronco, so that's all right. If you're a tax lawyer, that's all right. It's a whole other layer of appeal. So even if we reformed our assessor's office, there's this whole other office out there that hardly anyone knows out of that can completely change the whole picture of our assessments. And what they do is every year they're shifting more than $250 million of property tax levy burden on the homeowners by making giant cuts to commercial, which are too large, which study after study have shown is too large. You know, our city council, they rejected 50 to nothing, a $300 million property tax levy, which got a lot of attention. How many people have heard about the almost $500 million of property tax levy burden that was passed on to Chicagoans this year? So this is the kind of reason why we relish the opportunity to be with you here in this room. So that's where you, Tonika and Andrew, really come in. We need all of you. We need you in particular. You guys are great leaders. We need all of you to here to know about the stakes and to shine a light on it and to put pressure, to ask tough questions and to continue to push for change. Andrew, you know, you're demonstrating in your painstakingly detailed history of political organizing and activism from the Deep South to Gary and Chicago, what works, what people have tried before, the importance of sustaining effort. Tonika, you've shown through your own work as an artist, an educator, and activist across the city that we love, that the kind of grassroots energy is necessary to reforming unjust systems. We need that energy. We need to sustain it. We need to be telling these stories to sustain the effort. So let's take a second to recognize how important that work of translation that you do is, and as they continue to fight for reforms, as we all fight for reforms in the property tax system in Cook County, I'm going to be taking many of the points that you've made under discussion tonight to heart and reflecting on the ways that we can expand these conversations, push forward in a collective movement for change, and change more people's minds. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Fritz. Okay, we got time for 3 questions. I'm going to try to consolidate a couple here. This person says, these are big systemic issues. The solutions seem unreachable. Are there nonprofit groups, other organizations that are working on repairing them? And I'm combining that with someone who wanted you, Andrew, to give a shout out to the Contract Buyers League. So, you know, we'll just add them as kind of a historic organization, organizing force that worked on this and created change. And then if we can bridge that to, you know, what groups are doing that today.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I'll speak to the fact that you know, yes, there are structural problems here that need addressed, but there's plenty of things to do in the meantime. I mean, you know, protecting homeowners who are in danger of falling behind on their property taxes, fighting to, you know, through the appeals process and organizing at the neighborhood level to raise awareness are things that have worked in the past, and there's a long history of this, you know, going back here in Chicago to groups like the Community Action Program, Harold Washington's Black Taxpayers Federation. I mean, there was work being done to sort of organize for change and to explain these processes in plain English to the people who are most affected by them. And I think, you know, there's a lot to sort of learn from that and apply to, you know, really to the sort of issues that people are facing immediately right now. So I think, you know, we don't just need to sit and wait around and say, well, the structure needs to change and we'll just wait until that day comes. No, there is plenty of work to be done right now.
And who's doing the work now? Tonika Johnson is doing the work now. Okay, and for Tonika, do you anticipate that you will be able to expand the Unblock Inglewood to other Southside neighborhoods? And I've asked you this myself, I know.
Well, that depends on funding. We are going to be expanding to another block within the another block. Actually, we've already started expanding to the next block with the support of Chicago Community Trust, who is going to be funding Unblock Inglewood over the next 3 years. But most importantly, in order to expand, you have to understand the cost of all of these things and the kind of help that this specific group of homeowners, and then more importantly, the housing types, because we're learning so much with this project, the kind of repairs that homes over 100 years old that have had one homeowner for 30 years or so, the kinds of repairs that they need, and also, you know, learning a lot about the reasons in which maybe property taxes aren't getting paid or have been forgotten. The resources that they do or don't have in order to prioritize all of these things. So it's a lot of learning that's happening, and I think at the end of this project, and when I say end, I mean getting all of the homes repaired internally and externally to the satisfaction of the existing homeowners, as well as getting their estate planning going. You know, that is the end of the project, but also to have a report that is kind of detailing the process that can be used for experts who can make this kind of systemic change, because there is so much to learn and we want to elevate all of these stories and use this project to uplift the 70+ people on this block who are really, I view them as pioneers. I mean, they have stayed in this neighborhood and they have been taken advantage of in so many different ways, but the ways they have survived is also important to note and to document. And so that's what we really want to be able to do, because hopefully that information can offer some ideas for some change.
And we hadn't talked about that a whole bunch, but the estate planning piece is huge, and we get that all the time in the assessor's office. I mean, people living in grandmama's house, and it's never been legal, and something happens. That's an easy way that we lose our property. So the fact that you're doing that is so important.
Yeah, this is such a huge issue, and I talk a lot about this in the book. I mean, when properties fall, when a family doesn't leave a will, it falls into intestacy, and then you sort of those are the most vulnerable to tax delinquency. They're called heirs properties, and this is a problem that is been affecting black farmers in the South. It's affecting homeowners in northern cities, and this is an issue again where we can take action to sort of help families plan their estates and protect from this the vulnerability to tax delinquency and then the trap that is awaiting them when it happens.
And by the way, when you're a MacArthur genius, your phone starts blowing up, okay? So, that's what's going to happen.
That's my son.
That's what's going to happen. All right, so anybody aspiring to be a MacArthur genius,
That was my son.
get ready. Get ready.
Kelly, I wanted to add, I'm glad we're talking about estate planning because that's also what we're learning. We wanted to help this block of older homeowners keep their homes, find some ways to help the value of the house go up. But what we're learning is the vulnerability that this population is in because none of them have any idea of how to properly protect their homes and thinking about who to pass it on to. And so we're partnering with Mansueto. We're helping the residents get what a lot of people don't know about. I didn't know about it, called a TODI, Transfer to Death Instrument, which I advise everybody to look at. But this project is helping to educate not only the participants, but myself, and then being able to use all that we're learning to share with the larger public. And, hopefully by the end of the project, we will have some takeaways that we can share with the larger public that will make it easier for them to protect themselves. Because what we want people to know is that this could be all of us. It's not just black and brown neighborhoods, but we all are going to age, and there's things that we need to really think about and prioritize because we're really susceptible. And so I'm really excited about us being able to have this conversation with all of the older homeowners, and then to be able to help them protect other people.
Okay, last question, and maybe you can roll this into your closing remarks. I know we're out of time. One, I'm going to summarize, and we'll kind of combine two here. Simply, does redlining still exist? Okay, what I understand this to be. And then the second question, has the black tax been banned? You might want it to be. It might be like a badge of honor at this point to be.
Yeah, I mean, the latest estimates, found there was a study in 2020 that found that, nationwide, black and brown neighborhoods are over-assessed upwards of 13% higher than properties and comparable properties in white neighborhoods. So clearly, again, this is an unresolved problem that still continues to plague housing markets and disadvantage black neighborhoods, and again, drive down the value of those homes and sort of hold back the potential of home ownership. And so I think this is certainly something that is not a thing just of our past. Yeah.
Yes, redlining still exists. I think the question earlier kind of proves it. The devaluation. There's many ways in which black and brown neighborhoods are taken advantage of. We're learning about all of them now, and I think it's a really great time to be able to continue to educate ourselves. Information is accessible. Events like this is so important, and I really just want to uplift this kind of community. We minimize it and we just focus on policy only sometimes, but there is a step that happens before that, which is sharing this information, learning how to spread it, learning from experts to understand how it's applicable to our own lives or people that we care about. And so this is really, really important to kind of preventing, continual ongoing redlining that happens and morphs into new different ways. And if we understand truly what it is, then we'll be able to identify all of the new ways that it presents itself.
Well said. Any other closing remarks from either?
I'm really always encouraged to see folks coming out for these types of things. I mean, you know, to get people to come and listen to us talk about taxes is quite a feat in of itself. Yes, I mean, so again, like that's, you know, that's the goal, is to kind of see these problems clearly and then begin to sort of, you know, recognize the significance, the way that these are connected to many of the other issues we are familiar with and care about. You know, I think this is, you know, really an encouraging first step, a necessary first step towards change.
Okay, go buy some books before they're banned, okay? All right, run to the bookstore. All right, thanks, everybody. Thank them. Thank them. This is amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, you can purchase